Today's daf Nazir daf Lamed Hey, and we're going to start on the Dawud on the base, 6 lines from the bottom. So Gemara brings a brisa in order to challenge the position of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah from our Mishnah. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah from our Mishnah said a Nazir is only going to be liable if he eats 2 skins, shnei chartzanim and 1 zag, 2 skins and 1 seed, assuming that's how you translate chartzanim as a skin and zag as a seed, or if you translate chartzanim as a seed, it'll be 2 seeds and 1 skin, but we'll just assume that chartzanim means a skin now. So the brisa says, the Gemara is going to cite this brisa to challenge Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah of our Mishnah, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah of our Mishnah. The Gemara says, Amar Mar Ma Prat Mefurash Pri Gamor, just like in the verse, when it refers to a specific detail, it's referring to a completed fruit. We welcome back Amin. It's referring to a specific fruit that's prohibited to a Nazirite. Afkol Pri Gamor. So to every specific fruit will be prohibited for the Nazirite to eat. This comes to limit an unripe grape, which is called a boser, which is not going to be prohibited for a Nazir. And then Amris imkain ma'aniachakas b'mashmo shelo amro. So therefore, if that's the case, what's it coming to include? What did the verse leave over that it didn't specify? If you want us to say that it's teaching us about anav ha'melachim v'yaveshim, if you say it's teaching us that both fresh wine and fresh grapes and dry grapes are prohibited, haksive, that's explicit. Yayin v'chometz, it says the wine and the vinegar are prohibited. And if you want to say, if it's that's explicit that the grapes, the fresh and the dry are prohibited. And if you want to say yayin v'chometz, if you want to say it's referring to the wine and the vinegar, haksive, that's also explicit. So therefore, certainly, you shouldn't follow the final language, which is coming to exclude the boser, but the initial language means to say it's coming to include the boser and the grapes that have become wormy. So if the Gemara says, so if in the end it's including the boser grapes and the wormy grapes, why does the verse need to say from the skins until the seeds? Teaches a general rule that anytime you find a prat uklal, a specific followed by a general, you're not allowed to say that the general rule is adding on only what's similar to the prat. Wherever it's a prat followed by a general rule, it's coming to include everything. Until the Torah adds another limitation, like it adds with the Nazir, where it says on top of 35a, from the skins until the seed. So that's why the Gemara is telling us that the brisa is saying, the upshot of the brisa, it's a little back and forth, but the upshot of the brisa is that it's telling us that we need the prat to klal prat by the grapes to teach us that wherever there is a prat to klal prat, it's coming to tell us that it's only something that's similar to the prat that will be included, like the skins and the seeds by grapes. So if that's the case, that you're using mechar tzavim v'adzak to teach us this general rule of prat to klal prat, where Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah decome mukim lahai mechar tzavim v'adzak omar she'eno chayav ad sheyochol beis chartzanim v'zug prata minolei. So the Gemara tells us, according to Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, who tells us that he needs this verse of chartzanim v'adzak to say you're only liable when you eat 2 chartzanim, 2 skins, and 1 seed. So prata minolei, how does he know this basic principle of klal prat uklal? How is he going to learn this principle by a Nazir, prat to klal prat? The last prat is not extra for him to teach his principle by a Nazir. So Gemara says, well, Rebbe Elazar ben Azariah, Savra Rebbe Elazar. Rebbe Elazar ben Azariah doesn't actually say that the Nazir is a case of prat to call prat. He says it's a different case called a darish mi'et fariba. He says, and so therefore, he learns like Rebbe Elazar, who the Gemara assumes at this point only learns out by Nazir, what's called a mi'et fariba, a limitation followed by an amplification, which is generally assumed to be more inclusive, although at the end of our Gemara it seems to be less inclusive. And that's why he's going to say also the woody parts of the grapevine are going to be prohibited for the Nazir to eat. By same or alternatively, you could say Rebbe Elazar ben Azariah holds like the Rabbanan, who say from prat to kol prat, that you could say he holds like the Rabbanan. Because if you're going to say that if you want to say that the verse is coming to teach us, like Rebbe Elazar ben Azariah said, that you're only liable, that if you're going to say it's like Rebbe Elazar ben Azariah exclusively means say that it's only teaching us this principle of the chartzanim and the zag, that you need to eat both, and lichtavei rachmana lahai mechartzanim va'ad zag. It should have said mechartzanim va'ad zag gavei prati. It could have said these words mechartzanim va'ad zag before the klal. Why does it list them after the klal? Could have just said them in the beginning. Why is it written after the klal? Shema mina, it's to teach us this principle. It's to teach us this principle of a general followed by a specific. And so therefore, Rebbe Elazar ben Azariah is saying both, that we learn a general followed by a specific, and we learn mechartzanim va'ad zag, 2 skins and 1 seed. So therefore, Shema mina midrash bei klal prat to klal. Ikanami midrash bei ad sheyochal shnei chartzanim va'ad zag. It's to teach us both of these principles. Gemara says, "V'Rebbe Elazar the darash mi'et v'riba." So the Gemara assumes that even according to Rebbe Elazar, who is expounding mi'et v'riba, which is ribo mi'et v'riba, which is that more inclusive one, that we say that even the woody parts of the grapevine are going to be prohibited. So how does he know this principle of klal prat? Which Manole, where does he know this principle of klal prat to klal? So that is a basic principle throughout Shas. Tosfos asked the question, maybe he doesn't hold it. Just like the rabbis don't expound mi'et v'riba. That's what Tosfos says. Otherwise, he would have argued in every place. But since he doesn't argue, we're saying that even according to Rebbe Elazar, who says, Ribo Mio, this fundamental principle throughout Shas of klal, prat to klal, is something that's so axiomatic that he also holds by this position. So the Gemara says, well, since he doesn't learn out from the Nazir, what's his source for it? Rebbe Elazar, the Daresh, mi'et v'riba, that he expounds this idea of the limitation followed by the amplification is more inclusive than prat to call prat minale. Where does he know this principle of prat to call prat? So he learns it out from a specific verse. So if a person will give to his friend, this is an ox, a donkey, or a lamb, a donkey, an ox, or a lamb to guard. So this is the principle of a shomer, that if you are a watchman over somebody else's animal, and then the animal dies or breaks or it's captured, so under those circumstances, that's the specific. You give him a specific type of animal to watch or to guard. So all those things are prat. And then it says, and after it lists these specific animals, the donkey, the ox, the lamb, and then it says v'chol behema, or any animal, that's a klal. And then it says lishmor, to guard, that's choser uprat. It comes back with a specific. That the specific here is that you're guarding something specific, not all the animals. So that therefore it comes back and gives us some specifics. So we say chozeru prat. Prat to call prat yatadana okay prat. So therefore, he's saying from here we learn the principle that has to be something that's similar to the first example. So since the first example was the donkey, the ox, or the lamb, and the last one is an animal that is something that you're watching, which is something that you're moving, and it itself has a monetary value. So therefore, we're going to learn from here that the law of shmira, of protection, only applies to something that is itself moves and itself has a monetary value, but something that is not a monetary value and cannot be moved, like real estate, or let's say a contract, which doesn't have intrinsic value, then we're not going to apply the laws of shmira, of watching to. So that is what Tosfos, that is what the Gemara says. So that's the principle according to Rabbi Avo. Comes along Rava says, no, nafkale mehaikra. Rava says he's going to learn that from the following verse. It says about a carbon ola that is brought at the very beginning of Parshas Vayikra. It says, V'im minatzon carbano minaksavim o minaizim lola. If he brings from the flock his sheep, his carbon from the sheep or from the goats. Ve'im min, from is a prat. Hatzon, the flock, that's a klal. Kvasim v'izim, the sheep and the goats, that's chaser prat. Prat to klal klal, that's a specific klal by general, klal by specific. Iyatadana keina prat. It has to be something, in order for it to be a valid offering, it has to be something that's similar to the prat, which means, what does it have to be? It has to be something that's a behema tamima, that is to be a pure animal. And only from those are you able to bring an olah. And even, so that's the principle. It has to be from some animal that is an animal that's tamima, and that's the answer. So that's the basic principle. So Amalei Rav Yehuda midiskarto Rava. So Ua learns it out from the pasuk from Vayikra, from pasuk Yud in the first chapter of Vayikra. So Rav Yehuda midiskarto says to Rava, why don't you learn out from a different pasuk there? It says in the very beginning of Vayikra, Daber b'nei Yisrael martal lemadam ki akrim mikem karban Hashem min habeima min habakar min hatzon takrivus karban chem. So why don't we say as follows? Min, from, that's prat, that's the prat. Habehima, the animals, that's a klal. Bakar, vatzon, that's a chazaro prat. It's a specific file by general, file by specific. Prat to call prat, yetadan el keina prat. If it's a specific file, general, file by specific, then you can only derive it something that's similar to the specific. So that's what's included. That's what the law applies to. Amalei. So when Rabbi Yehuda midiskarta says this to Rava responds, "Min hai leiko amash mamina." From this pasuk, you wouldn't have been able to arrive at this principle. The ime asam, if you were deriving it just from there, abamina, I would have said abahema when it says, because what did he say? He says min is the prat and the behema is the klal. So I would have said Abahema, that I would have said when it says Abahema, it also includes the wild animal called the chaya, not just the domestic animals, which are the sheep and the cattle. I would have said chaya b'klal Bahema. I would have said that this includes the wild animals. And so therefore, when the Torah says min Abahema, it's as though the Torah is saying min Abahema min chaya, from the wild animal and the domestic animals. And you could say min is coming to exclude either a portion of the behemoths or a portion of the chayos. But you can't say that min is coming to exclude all of the chayos. So that's the difficult way. So the Gemara responds with a question according to Tosfos. Amar chaya bechal behema. The Gemara says, why would you say that the chaya is included within the domesticated animals? Haksiv bakar utzon. But doesn't it say the sheep and the cattle, and these are behemoths, and so for sure it's excluding the chayos. And so therefore, obviously, the first specific is also not referring to the chayos. So therefore, for sure, the behema is not including the chaya. Avoy prat to call prat, v'yeta danal keina prat. And so therefore, we could have learned out this principle of prat to call prat. So that's how Rabbi Yehuda Diskarta responds to Rav. He says, I could have learned it out from here. Mar seems to leave that and doesn't respond, but the Meiri has a version that of a response of Rava to Rabbi Yehuda Diskarta. According to our text, Rabbi Yehuda Diskarta ends the conversation there, but the Meiri says that Rava responds and says, no, you can't learn out from this pasuk prat to klal prat, but you can only learn out klal prat to klal, because mina behema is a klal, bakar tzon is a prat, and then takrivu is another klal. And so therefore, according to this explanation, the Gemara is now why the Gemara goes into discussion of klal prat to klal as opposed to prat to klal klal. So that makes more sense according to that version of the Meiri, the next line of the Gemara, because now the Gemara is going to say, well, how do we know about prat klal prat? Well, if we don't have the Meiri's text, all of a sudden, why are we going into a discussion of the specific followed by the general, followed by the specific? So the Gemara says, when we know in the hachalihu, and from where do we know this principle that's how we do indeed expound this discussion? The Tanya, because we have the following case of a prat to follow prat from the law of Nazir Sheni, that you have to bring the secondary tithe up to Jerusalem, but you could also transfer the secondary tithe onto money, bring the money to Jerusalem, and then you could spend the money on certain things. And those things are not everything, as we'll see from these verses. But now, you place the money on anything your heart desires, that's a klal, that's a general. You could spend it on cattle, sheep, and wine. That's a prat, that's specific. Anything that you want, chazar uklal, that's a general rule. So we say a klal, uprat, uklal. We say general followed by specific, followed by general. Yatadan el keina prat. You have to, therefore, you can only learn it to derive anything similar to the specific. Ma prat mafurash mi pri. Just like the specific, where it says the sheep, the cattle, the wine, and the shechar. Just like there, it's referring to something that comes from another source, i.e., it's a fruit from a fruit. Vigidule karka, and it's something nourished from the ground. Afkol pri mi pri vigidule karka. So to anything that is a pri mi pri and a gidule karka. It's a very powerful point here, by the way, that we're saying that an animal and a wine are both what's called pri mi pri and gidule karka. They're both categorized as something that's fruit from a fruit, meaning to say we are fruits. We're something that comes from a mother, and also we're something that's nourished by the land. And this is excluding certain things that are not nourished from the land and are not fruit from fruits, like water and salt and fish. Fish is not nourished from the land. And this is a powerful idea, that we are all in this category of something that's nourished from the land and a fruit from a fruit. So nichte klal prat to klal. So the Talmud says, well, since a klal prat to klal is the same thing in effect as kein prata dayinan, well, since it's the general followed by specific followed by general is we're basically saying we look at the specific. So if that's the case, klal basra mayahani. So what is the last? We're saying that a general followed by specific. We look at the specific. What does the last general point teach us? Called the dummy. So it's adding on. It's not just the specific. It's anything similar to the specific. So the Gemara says, well, okay, fine. V'su prat uklal prat ke'ina pratayan. And if you have a specific followed by a general followed by a specific, it sounds like that is the same thing as a general followed by specific followed by general. Prata basra mayahani. When you have a specific followed by general followed by specific, you're also looking at this at the specific. So what does the last specific add on? Gemara says, if you didn't have the last specific, I would just say that the general rule is adding on everything to the prat. But now we're saying you only add on something similar to the prat. So the Gemara says, train call prata, train protocol. Well, now it seems to be like it's the same law, whether it's two generals followed by a specific or two specifics followed by a general, came protodion, and that we look at in both cases as though anything similar to the specific is what the verse is referring to. Ma'ika bene bene. What's the difference between a general followed by specific followed by general and a specific followed by a general followed by specific? Aren't they saying the same thing? Mer gives us an answer that the answer is Ika, there's a distinction. If you have two generals followed by specific, Ika prata damile, I feel b'chad sada. Then if it's two generals and a specific, then if there's something that's similar to the specific, even in one aspect, Marabina, and it's going to be included. But if you have trey prata kol, if you have two specifics and one general, Ika prata dami mishnei tzadim, then it needs to be similar to it on both aspects, Marbinam. The chad side will Marbinam. If it's only similar in one aspect, we're not going to include it. Mara says, Mirte prat ukwao, nasa kwao, musaf al prat v'srabe kol. So the Gemara says, well, let's say we have a specific followed by a general. Then we say that the general is adding on to the specific and it's including everything. But if you also have a specific limitation followed by amplification, nami riba kol misrabi kol mili. We're also saying it's adding on and including everything. Well, that's the case. Ma'ika be mi riba with pratu kol. What's the distinction between a limitation followed by an addition and a pratu kol, and a limitation followed by an addition? Exclusion followed by an inclusion. So the Gemara says there's a distinction. That need to riba loving in owen lo. So if it would be just a protocol, which we don't have by the Nazir, then we would add on even leaves and branches. But if it was mi'et v'riba, we'll love them in o and lo. So if it would just be the mi'et v'riba, then we would just add on the lovin, but not the owen, the branches, but not the leaves. Now this is difficult because this seems to be not what the first part of our Gemara says. Because, and Tosfos asked the question, Rabbi Lazar expounds at the beginning of the sukkah that the riboy and the mi'et, the limitation and the amplification includes also the leaves and the branches, because he expounds mi'et riba, and it only excludes the shabishta, which is the really wooded part. So therefore, this seems to contradict that part. So Tosfos' answer is that there's two types of leaves, and what Rabbi Lazar is including, that's the soft leaves, which are similar to the branches, and the leaves that are spoke about here, these are the very hard leaves that are not edible at all. And nevertheless, according to those who expound Klal Prat, it would include those. And so, but this is a fundamental question, which is which the commentaries on our text need to take up. Okay, we'll continue, but I'm going to stop the recording here if anybody has any questions.